Hello friends and welcome back for another episode of Indie Impressions. My name is Nick and today we're going to be checking out The Rapture is here and you will be forcibly removed from your home by developer Connor Sherlock, and I think this one gets the award for possibly one of the longest titles of any game I've covered on Indie Impressions, and forgive the fact that the title is going to be all letters in the thumbnail, just kind of the way it had to be. But anyway, it's a first-person, I almost want to say abstract exploration game. It's not so much abstract. It's sort of pseudo-horror and cerebral, which is a thing that I don't necessarily see a lot of. And you know, if you've watched the channel for any length of time, that I'm quite a sucker for this style of game, where it's sort of interpretive, introspective, and we get to wander around and sort of figure things out for ourselves, and I think that's very much the situation that's going on here. And another thing worth mentioning, and definitely an awesome thing, is the fact that the wild dude himself, my friend and fellow YouTuber J Smith OTI, actually did voice work on this one. So it's going to be essentially wandering around through a landscape, and occasionally we'll find a little beacon, so to speak, a little light beacon that we're going to walk onto, and then we'll hear a little bit of an excerpt from an H.P. Lovecraft story. So there's that going on, some possible creepy undertones and things, and, well, the rest of it we're just going to kind of experience on the fly. So let's take a quick look at About before we start, and I should also mention, on top of the very beautiful title screen and graphics in general in this game, also outstanding soundtrack, which is going to be also available for purchase, and I'll have the links and everything for that. So About takes us here, and you can see everyone that contributed. I always just like to show this stuff out before we get started when possible. Does everyone... Oh, everyone's got their own little chime that happens when you mouse over things. You'd almost get the wrong idea from such... It almost looks like a cheerful screen, but then the whole actual... general ambience of the game when you're in it feels a little bit more somber, as well we will see in just a moment. So let's mouse over the title and start this up. Alright, so here we are. We have spawned into the world a very large and very expansive plane that goes off in every direction, and then the soundtrack kicks in, and then we look up at the sky and we notice there is a massive, I suppose, UFO, unless it's just a hole in the sky. I'm not sure. Either one could be equally poetic and interesting. But as we look out, we can see that there's actually, all the way out in the distance there on that other hill, or mountain, it's kind of hard to tell with the perspective here, there's actually a little white light flickering off in the distance. Then much closer, we've got this yellow beacon right next to that monolithic structure, and it's all very kind of foreign and alien looking. And then when you cross that with the fact that it's got some very nice contrast going on with the way the lighting works, almost feels like you're playing something like Stalker. You know, you could definitely see this being like a post-nuclear explosion or something, where this is just all that's left. It's a very desolate, very isolating feeling, being in a landscape that's quite this large. And as you can see, there's a fence that seems to go on just about forever in every direction, and we can actually head in all of those directions. Everything you see here, with the exception of what's beyond that fence, is actually free for exploration. So it's a very, very large landscape, which I think definitely gives you, like I said earlier, that sense of scale and that sense of tininess, especially when you contrast it with this ship up in the sky that, when you actually look directly at, plays that crazy vibrating sound. So it kind of puts you in a bit of a trance. So we're making our way up towards this first beacon, and although the game is what you make of it, basically what's going to happen is we're going to head from beacon to beacon. I believe each color represents an individual character who is sort of expounding on their specific story, or at least is consistently reading from the same writings, and we're just going to try and piece those pieces together as we find the different points in the architecture in the world. Now, I've heard that there are actually 4 different... like, it would require 4 different unique playthroughs to reach everything that's going on in this, so I'm not sure what exactly about the game is dynamic or is changing from one playthrough to the next, but I know that we've got 20 minutes to make as much out of this as we choose, and if you look very carefully, you can actually see, if you can find sort of like a focal point here, and I'll give you this monolith to look against, the ship is very, very slowly moving towards being directly over us. So that 20-minute point is basically, if you want to go ahead and run around as much as you can, find everything that you can, and hear everything that you can, that's kind of your limiting factor, although it doesn't actually show you anywhere on the screen or tell you that explicitly. So I'm going to listen to this first one. I'll be quiet through that so you can hear what's going on.
The natural leadership, which with my uncle procured the instruments from the laboratories of Brown University and the Cranston Street Armory, and instinctively assumed direction of our venture, was a marvelous commentary on the potential vitality and resilience of the man of 81. Elihu Whipple had lived according to the hygienic laws he had preached as a physician, and but for what happened later, would be here in full vigor today.
So they're just short little excerpts, but it's kind of nice to have something, as you've, again, noticed how large this landscape is. It's nice to have something going on to make what can feel a little bit like a slog at times, have something to put your focal point toward. How's the lighting just changed drastically? That's really cool. I mean, look how pretty that is. That is a really nice shot right there. I mean, maybe a little bit less since the fact that the ship is in the way, but then again, it's so unnatural looking, actually, that it's kind of unique all in of itself. So you notice when that beacon disappeared, we actually had this new beacon appear over here, and we'll continue that same character's progression, I believe, when we talk to this one or walk over this one.
What I heard in my youth about the shunned house was merely that people died there in alarmingly great numbers. That, I was told, was why the original owners had moved out some 20 years after building the place. It was plainly unhealthy, perhaps because of the dampness and fungus growth in the cellar, the general sickish smell, the drafts of the hallway, or the quality of the well and pump water.
So we could continue that same one by going over to the right. As you saw, a new beacon appeared. I'm going to choose to go over to the blue one because I know that one is Josh, and I would like to get him in on the fun. It's not too often that I get to bring one of my friends in on one of these videos, whether it's through guesting or actually being in the game is a kind of a first, I suppose. Now, there are some diverse little locations and landmarks throughout this very large landscape, one of them being this very brightly colored field here, and I'm not sure exactly why things are the way they are, and I think that's kind of the case with a lot of this game, but it does leave it up for interpretation, and this is quite nice to look at. I was really hoping that at some point the whole field, like the entirety of the landscape, would start to turn like the title screen did, but I think this might be about as close as we're going to get to that. I almost felt like, while I was playing through this, and I did do one run just to see what the scope of the game was going to be, I almost felt like I wish things went a little bit further and were elaborated on a little bit more in terms of like how paranormal or how out of the ordinary things started to get. Because, not to spoil anything, but it's like it kind of stays generally within the realms of reality, although tweaks it just a little bit, which is one of those things that I think a lot of people would value, in that it keeps you in the more cerebral realm, where it's like, okay, maybe you can actually relate to this a little bit, since there are actually some things keeping us grounded here. And it is still pretty wild, seeing that giant thing floating overhead. So I think we're about to reach the next beacon here. And look at the fog effect across the ground, too. Very nice. And there's actually some power lines over in one direction. I'm going to head in that direction probably next. Oh, yeah, I think they're over there. And see if we can maybe find anything in that direction. So I don't know, maybe there's actually details to this that I haven't seen. Although I did walk around most of the map, I think there was still more than I had run into in my short time with it.
The most merciful thing in the world, I think, is the inability of the human mind to correlate all of its contents. We live on a placid island of ignorance in the midst of black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage far. The sciences, each straining in its own direction, have hitherto harmed us little. But someday, piecing together of disassociated knowledge will open up such terrifying vistas of reality and of our frightful position therein, that we shall either go mad from the revelation, or will flee from the deadly light into the peace and safety of a new dark age. I shall never knowingly supply a link in so hideous a chain. I think that the professor too intended to keep silent regarding the part that he knew, and that he would have destroyed his notes had not sudden death seized him.
What a great performance. I really enjoyed finding that and having it be the way it was. I think that's really cool to have him highlighted in there.
My knowledge of the thing began in the winter of 1927 with the death of my granduncle, George Gamble Angel, Professor Emeritus of Semitic Languages in Brown University, Providence, Rhode Island. Professor Angel was widely known as an authority on ancient inscriptions and had frequently been resorted to by the heads of prominent museums. So his passing at the age of 92 may have been recalled by many. And as my granduncle's heir and executor, for he died a childless widower, I was expected to go over his papers with some thoroughness, and for that purpose, moved his entire set of files and boxes to my quarters in Boston.
Wow, perfect timing. We pretty much just got to the next one then. I haven't actually seen any of these beacons complete to the end of them, so maybe something cool happens when we do that.
The first half of the principal manuscript told a very peculiar tale. It appears that on March 1st, 1925, a thin, dark young man of neurotic and excited aspect had called upon Professor Angel bearing a singular clay bas-relief, which was then exceedingly damp and fresh. His card bore the name of Henry Anthony Wilcox, and he called himself psychically hypersensitive. The sculptor abruptly asked for the benefit of the host's archaeological knowledge in identifying the hieroglyphics on the bas-relief. He said, "It is new indeed, for I made it last night in a dream of strange cities. And dreams are older than brooding Tyre, or the contemplative Sphinx, or the garden-girdled Babylon."
It's an interesting way to make the gameplay like that, and also I'd not seen this whole area over here. Somehow I seem to have walked right around it last time, so I guess there's actually some stuff to explore that I didn't even find it. But it's really interesting that you could play through the same game a bunch of times just to hear the different stories, and that essentially, even though the gameplay is pretty basic, just kind of walking through the same landscape, these beacons totally give you a different way to see it each time. Although it's a little strange that it seemed like we had to double back upon ourselves in our previous path, but I guess now we're explaining this point on the map by reaching here, so maybe we'll find out why this is so brightly colored now.
It was then that he began that rambling tale which suddenly played upon a sleeping memory and won the fevered interest of my uncle. There had been a slight earthquake tremor the night before, and the most considerable felt in New England for some years, and Wilcox's imagination had been keenly affected. Upon retiring, he had the unprecedented dream of great cyclopean cities, of titan blocks and sky-flung monoliths, all dripping with green ooze and sinister with latent horror. Hieroglyphics had covered the walls and pillars, and from some undetermined point below came a voice that was not a voice. Chaotic sensation which only fancy would transmute into sound, but which he attempted to render by the almost unpronounceable jumble of letters.
Alright, so I think we've got one or two more here. What's going on down here? I think there's... Oh, I thought that was fog or something. Apparently just rocks. This one seems to be a bit further than the other ones. What are all those cylinders off in the distance? Are those the monolithic crystals? They could be.
Average people in society and business, New England's traditional salt of the earth, gave an almost completely negative result. Those scattered cases of uneasy but formless nocturnal impressions appear here and there, always between March 23rd and April 2nd, the period of young Wilcox's delirium. Scientific men were modestly affected, but it was from the artists and the poets that pertinent answers came, and I know that panic would have broken loose had they been able to compare notes. As was lacking in their original letters, I half suspected the compiler of having asked leading questions, or of having edited the correspondence in corroboration of what he had latently resolved to see.
Now this is really interesting. I don't think I'd seen anything like this spawn in before, but I think I just hadn't proceeded enough along one of these chains to actually have anything really crazy happen, which is what kind of left me with the impression that there might not be too much going in a particularly supernatural direction, but I'm really enjoying whatever that is. Not really sure though. I was kind of hoping maybe we get to explore some kind of crazy city at some point, but I think that might be a little bit more than is going to be possible here.
The responses from the esthetes told a disturbing tale. From February 28th to April 2nd, a large proportion of them had dreamed very bizarre things. The intensity of the dreams being immeasurably stronger during the period of the sculptor's delirium. Over a fourth of those who reported anything reported scenes and half sounds not unlike those which Wilcox had described. And some of the dreamers confessed acute fear of the gigantic nameless thing visible towards the last.
So now I find myself in a bit of a strange position because I don't actually see any more blue beacons, but it also might just be because I'm in this forest right now, so maybe I should head back down and out of here. But I was kind of hoping maybe it was leading us in a specific direction, guiding us towards wherever... Oh, actually, well, as luck would have it, apparently we were going in the right direction, and it is actually relatively near where I was hoping to go, which is by the power line. Look at that, towering over us like that.
His name was John Raymond LaGrosse, and he was by profession an inspector of police. With him, he bore the subject of his visit, a grotesque, repulsive, and apparently very ancient stone statuette, whose origin he was at a loss to determine. It must not be fancied that Inspector LaGrosse had the least interest in archaeology. and on the contrary, his wish for enlightenment had prompted by purely professional considerations. The statuette, idol, fetish, or whatever it was, had been captured some months before in the wooded swamps of South New Orleans during a raid of a supposed voodoo meeting. And so singular and hideous were the rites connected with it that the police could not but realize that they had stumbled on a dark cult totally unknown to them and infinitely diabolic.
So I guess now I understand what the developer meant when he said optimal plays, because I suppose it's quite possible that you could find yourself headed in the complete wrong direction after you walk past one of these beacons, and if you do run out of time, well, I guess the story sort of remains unresolved with each character. And I think there's actually a pretty cool parallel to things in this, in that you have 20 minutes to complete this, which is kind of like telling its own story, and each person's story is going to be a little bit individual based on how you proceed through things. So I suppose, you know, going through this is a little bit like a life. Let's hear one more.
There were legends of a hidden lake unglimpsed by mortal sight, in which dwelt a huge, formless, white, pulpous thing with luminous eyes. And squatters whispered that bat-winged devils flew up out of the caverns in the inner earth to worship it at midnight. They said it had been there before d'Iberville, before La Salle, before the Indians, and before even the wholesome beasts and birds of the woods. It was a nightmare itself, and to see it was to die. But it made men dream, and so they knew enough to keep away.
Okay, now I'm still again hoping that I'm going in the right direction here, because I'm not seeing any more beacons. Also, on top of the beacons just being like a useful way for you to find your way and, you know, progress the story on each person, I also find that it's kind of a cool thing to see that bright kind of neon fluorescent light juxtaposed against the landscape. I think that actually helps kind of drive the theme home, that there's certainly some things that are definitely outside of the ordinary in pretty much every direction. I mean, even if you're not looking up at the giant ship that's going to be over you for most of it. Now, is there another one near us? 'Cause I don't want to start on another path. Although I did hit, I think it was 2 of the first ones, but they were probably the closest to get to. Alright, so now is the point where I'm wondering about turning back. Because I think I'm probably going to run out of time pretty soon. I don't have a timer going on this one, but I can't imagine I have all that much longer. When we start seeing little, like, fireworks in front of our eyes, that's when we know we're going to be running out of time very soon. Look at that, that's really pretty. Actually, moments this looks a little bit like Skyrim or something, too. As you have all this fog everywhere, and things are just looking very kind of serene, but somber at the same time. Alright, I don't see any more blue. Man, that is so crazy looking. I love that it's silhouetted, too, like you can't really make out any details on it. And the ship is pretty much right over us now. I couldn't not think of course, the signs as well. The whole farm thing with the alien invasion, and I'm not sure if there's necessarily a correlation between a ship going overhead with H.P. Lovecraft, but I'm also not exactly super familiar with all of the stuff to do with Lovecraft, so I could be just totally off on that. But if this is sort of maybe a thematic blending, that would also be just fine. You know, grab the strengths where you can, take some artistic license from it, and very likely that I'm just mistaken on that. Oh, there's another blue beacon off in the distance. See if I can make it on time. See, in this case, I kind of wish that the landscape was a little bit smaller, just because it's a long way to run when you don't know where you're going at times. And if you find yourself on the total opposite end of the map, well, you're going to be doing quite a bit of backtracking, and that might take more time than you actually have. I've also noticed since I've been sprinting for the majority of the gameplay, occasionally I'll see my character almost like stumble a little bit for a step or two. I'm not sure if that's just my mind playing tricks on me or if that's actually happening. Alright, we're very close, almost there. I love these crazy red plants as well. It's nice that there's some different things going on in the flowers and the ground stuff.
Only poetry or madness could do justice to the noises heard by Legrasse's men as they plowed on through the black morass toward the red glare in the muffled tom-toms. There are vocal qualities peculiar to men and vocal qualities peculiar to beasts, and it is terrible to hear the one when the source should yield the other. Animal fury and orgiastic license here whipped themselves to the demonic heights by howls and squawking ecstasies that tore and reverberated through those nighted woods like pestilential tempests from the gulfs of hell.
That is really cool. It looks like the pyramids have all appeared at this point. Oh man, and the beacon's all the way out there. I'm never going to make it in time. I believe the soundtrack has also been sort of ratcheting up in intensity, too, as we get to the climax of the story, which I think is very important. And sort of driving home the point that, you know, the finality is what we're looking toward here. And it's quite stirring. Can we make it on time, though? I'm not sure if we're going to. I'm going to try my best. There's not really like a direct route, more direct than going straight at it, though, so I guess there is that. We are going to be headed in as fast a way as we can. Maybe give me a hoverboard or something. That would certainly help. Don't really do that. Okay, I think we are going to make it there for that one. I didn't realize there were going to be so many parts to each person's narrative. So you really are going to have to go through each one really carefully to be able to get to every single point. And when I first played this, I found myself wandering very aimlessly, which is definitely not the way to do it. So although it is somewhat like an open-world Dear Esther, it should probably be played a little bit more directly than that.
They worshipped, so they said,
there we go,
the great old ones, who lived ages before there were any men, and who came to the young world out of the sky. Those old ones were gone now, inside of the earth and under the sea, but their dead bodies had told their secrets and dreams to the first men, who formed a cult which had never died. This was that cult, and the prisoners said it has always existed and always would exist, hidden in distant wastes and dark places all over the world, until the time when the great priest Cthulhu, from his dark house in the mighty city of Relay under the waters, should rise and bring the earth again beneath his sway. Someday, he would call, when the stars were ready, and the secret cult would always be waiting to liberate him.
I didn't want to go too fast, or I was going to actually start it up without being ready.
These great old ones were not composed altogether of flesh and blood. They had shape, for did not this star-fashioned image prove it? But that shape was not made of matter. When the stars were right, they can plunge from world to world through the sky. But when the stars were wrong, they could not live. They all lay in stone houses in the great city of Relay, preserved by the spells of mighty Cthulhu for a glorious resurrection when the stars and the earth might once more be ready for them. But at that time, some force from outside must serve to liberate their bodies. The spells that preserved them intact likewise prevented them from making an initial move, and they could only lie awake in their dark and think, whilst uncounted millions of years rolled by. Even now they talk in their tombs. When, after infinities of chaos, the first men came, the great old ones spoke to the sensitive among them by molding their dreams, for only thus could their language reach the fleshy minds of mammals.
You know, I thought I had seen one more beacon way off in the distance, so if that was the case, then I definitely didn't time this very well. But I guess the story remains unclosed in this case, and I'm glad to see that the whole ground turned neon like I was saying, perhaps. I was hoping to see earlier. But that is quite an effect towards the end there. We've got all of these different colors happening overlaid on top of each other. It's really cool. I think we've still got a few more moments, though, before things finally come to a complete end. The ship has taken over the whole sky, and I think I actually made it to the beacon. I might even walk over it. It looked like it was right in front of me, but no, guess not. So that is going to be the end of this episode. The Rapture is here, and you will be forcibly removed from your home. Thank you very much for watching, and I should say thank you to my guest, J. Smith OTI, for providing about half of the dialogue on this one. So definitely a good guy, and you should definitely check out his YouTube channel in the description as well. But definitely check this out. This game is totally free. There's still more to be seen, even in this linear dialogue that I was having, or linear monologue, rather, from this character's writing perspective. So go get it yourself. Try it out. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. This is a really unique game, definitely worth spreading the word about, and one that I'm really happy to have had the chance to play. So thank you for watching. Make sure you check out the description, and make sure you come back again tomorrow. New episodes are every single day. So I'll see you back for that, and please do consider leaving some support. I greatly appreciate it, and I do read every single comment. So I'll catch you tomorrow, and I hope you have a lovely night.